they knew I was going to be able to explain it to them, so I explained it to them. And this is sort of a very brief explanation of what is going on with the plan. And how I want to start is I want to start with Bibi's map. Now, a lot of you don't read Hebrew, but those Israelis read Hebrew and they still couldn't make heads or tails out of it. Now, what is this plan? Okay, if you see this plan, there are three areas. There's this area, which is Jordan. This area, which is the Jordan Valley, and this area, which we really can't figure out from this photo too well. So what I'm going to be doing in this hour, or this half an hour with about 15 minutes of question and answers, is you're going to walk away actually understanding what Bibi Netanyahu is pointing to in this diagram. And this is what they had no clue what was being talked about. Okay, so now let's go to the, hold a second. So this is the actual diagram. And you could see there are these three areas. Now, what is this? Where is this? Where is this coming from? What is going on? Well, you're going to understand everything very, very quickly. Okay. Now, what this is the Netanyahu Plan. Okay. And the diagram you just saw here really fits into a larger diagram, which, if you take the area of that Bibi had in that other diagram, it's basically this area here. Okay, that he was pointing out to. So this is the larger context of what Bibi was showing. Okay. Now, what is this? This is the Trump plan. And by the way, for simplicity's sake, what I've done here is basically show pretty much, I'm going to be focusing in on the top half of the West Bank / Judea and Samaria. And to make it simple, because really what's going on in the north half is going on in the south half, for all intents and purposes. So to, again, give you an idea of what we're going to be focusing on, it's this area right here, just a little bit south of Jerusalem. Okay. Now, on the face of it, the Trump plan and the Bibi plan actually look very similar. Okay, if you take the Trump plan and the Bibi plan and you line them up, you'll see there's this area here, and there's this area here, and then there's this area here, and I can't, okay, and there's this area here. Sorry, I didn't draw that one too well. Hold one second. There's this area here. Okay. Now, I'm going to focus on the northern lobe of the West Bank. And this is the northern
What just
lobe.
happened to this?
What? Did anyone ask a question?
Post attack. Hold on.
Yeah, the yellow color or the brown color, what does that signify?
The yellow, in this diagram, excellent question. The yellow color is the color that Israel will annex.
Okay, and the brown is
The
not.
brown is the non-annexed to be created Palestinian state area.
Okay,
Okay?
thank you.
So now,
Why is this thing working like that?
let's go to the Trump plan. And the Trump plan is the same thing. You've got the area that Israel will be annexing in that I've just circled in blue. And the area of the future Palestinian state in red. Now, what's going on here? Well, what's going on here is really a major misunderstanding of when people have gone to Israel, people go to Israel, they always hear the following thing: oh, there are strategic areas that we're going to keep, and there are strategic areas, and there are non-strategic areas that we're going to give up. Now, most people, when they hear, matter of fact, 99% of people, when they hear that, they think there's going to be a tug of war. And they'll split the rope and they keep the part that's closest to them and they keep the part that's furthest away. But let me tell you what happened. I had my topographic map made about 30 plus years ago, and I saw the diagram that's in front of you now. And I said, oh my gosh, I understand this graphic. And I'll show you why I understood this graphic. Israel's going to keep the land that's closest to it, and it's going to give the brown area, and it's going to give up the part that's the red with the line through it area. Because isn't that the tug of war? Aren't we keeping the part that's closest to us and giving up the part that's closest, further away? And then I looked a little closer. And I looked at this area right here. And I realized when I looked at this area here, which is the legend, that it was exactly the opposite. Israel would be keeping the land that's furthest away. Hold a sec. Sorry, guys. Having a little, okay. Israel would be keeping the land that's furthest away and giving up the land that's closest. And that really didn't make a heck of a lot of sense, except if you looked at the topography. Not that it makes sense when you look at the topography, but let me explain how the topography fits in to this situation. You see, this is a view of my topographic map. And there are two major regions in this map. There is the Jordan Valley. And what is the Jordan Valley? The Jordan Valley, this is this line that I'm drawing in purple is the Watershed Line, meaning this is the highest part in the West Bank, and the water goes down this way when it falls. And similarly, the water goes down this way when it falls in Western Samaria. So this, the orange that you're seeing, is Western Samaria. Now, why is that so important? It's so important because the right side in red happens to be very steep, and the left side is very shallow. And so what it turned out is, when in 1967, Israel took over the West Bank, the general was looking at this and he said, oh, this area that's in red doesn't have any Palestinians in it because no one could build there. The part in brown is the side that has all the Palestinians. So we'll annex the valley that doesn't have any Palestinians and create a Palestinian state here, as if this is going to somehow work. And that is the origin of both the Netanyahu plan and the Trump plan. And here's another view of the West Bank. And the blue patch is the 70% of Israel's population and 80% of her industrial base. Now, what this graphic shows is there's a steep part to the West Bank, which is this area right here. That is the Jordan Valley. Then there's a shallow part to the West Bank. That's the left-hand part of the West Bank. And it is on this area that all the most of the Palestinians live. And that's why Israel, quote unquote, didn't want to annex that part. So now these are various diagrams. And here, this is a sort of a simpler view of it, where here you have the Jordan, you have Jordan. Here you have the Jordan Valley. In between these two, you have the Jordan River. Well, I'll do a different color for that. Sorry, guys. The blue is the Jordan River. Okay. Now, the crest line is to the left of the green. And here you have really the proposed Palestinian area. That's sort of a top-down view. Now, what are the problems with this? What are the problems? What are the problems, and how are these problems embedded in the Trump plan? Well, the first problem is water resources. In that water falls in Western Samaria and goes to pre-67 Israel. Now, believe it or not, in the Trump plan, this exact problem is raised. Because if the Palestinians create dams or suck out the water, they could stop a large part of Israel's water sources from reaching Israel. What's another problem? Saltwater intrusion. And this, again, is explicitly referenced in the Trump plan. If anyone's interested, I'll give you the exact pages that all of these things are referenced. But the essential idea is fresh water under the ground pushes out, and salt water pushes east from the Mediterranean. And if the Palestinians hold back the water, bang, Israel will lose its water. And basically that's what's happened in the Gaza Strip. Another issue, airspace. Under the Trump plan, Israel, believe it or not, would keep the Palestinian airspace. Now it's a question whether Israel really even has the airspace of the Gaza Strip now. Because once you don't really control the land, you're going to have a hard time controlling the airspace, because they can bring in all sorts of anti-aircraft weapons that are very, very small. Also in the Trump plan is the ability to have and retain Israeli monitoring and air defense weapons in the West Bank. And basically the answer is there's almost no, very, very little residual Israeli radars and or anti-aircraft weapons in the West Bank, which is a huge problematic issue under the Trump plan, even if you take the Trump plan at face value. And of course, there's my famous Katyusha rockets. The Gaza Strip was supposed to be demilitarized and was also supposed to have a corridor blocking anything coming in and out, similar to the Jordan Valley. We all know how the Gaza Strip turned out. So now let's just remember what the Alone Plan was. The Alone Plan was Israel keeping this area and Israel ceding this area. Okay? So essentially, to keep it very simple and black and white, Israel was creating a Palestinian state in the western 2/3 of the West Bank, and Israel was keeping the eastern third of the West Bank. Now, how Israel could get to that eastern third is really not clear, but that was the general plan. But now we're going to have what is really a total virtual refutation of the Alone Plan, the Bibi Netanyahu Plan, and the Trump Plan. Now, who is going to refute this? I mean, I'm sitting in beautiful Palm Beach, and even though it was raining today, but I'll tell you who's going to refute this. Would you believe the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the United States of America is going to refute this. What happened was in June 26 of 1967, this was soon after the Six-Day War, the United States president tasked the Joint Chiefs of Staff that Israel had just taken over the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Sinai. And he goes to his Joint Chiefs of Staff and he says, listen, guys, Israel just took over all this chunk of land. We want to have some kind of, know what we're talking about, what Israel can keep and not keep. Can you please tell me what Israel can keep and what Israel doesn't have to keep? Okay. So 2 weeks later, the Joint Chiefs of Staff issue a report. Right there. It was internally published on June 26, 1967. It has since been declassified, and so this document is I'm not violating any laws. I'm a good American citizen. I'm not going to violate any laws. And you can see on the bottom, it was declassified. Okay, so this is a declassified report of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And what happens is the Joint Chiefs of Staff task their best brains to investigate this. And guess what? They had their own map. And this is their map. Now, again, and this was in the actual Joint Chiefs of Staff report. This is not my map, everybody. This is their map. Now, again, if everyone notices, this map is sort of similar to Bibi's map in that there's this area here, that's the Jordan Valley in red, and there's the area here that runs from the crest line, the Watershed Line, that's the Watershed Line that I just showed you in that red arrow, okay? So they're similar in a way, except for one huge difference. When you look at the legend at the bottom, and I'll give you a little close-up. When you look at the legend in the bottom, what does the legend say? The legend says the minimum territory needed by Israel for defensive purposes. And guess what? It's the exact opposite. The exact opposite of what the Alone Plan sketches out and what Trump's plan sketches out. This plan would keep the areas that have all the Palestinians for defense, because the Joint Chiefs of Staff was not looking at this from a political point of view. They were looking at it from a military point of view. And they said, Israel can't survive if you give up what I've just circled in red. That's not Mark Langfan talking, okay? That is the Joint Chiefs of Staff talking of the United States Army. Not the United States Army. That's the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the whole United States Armed Forces is talking. And they're saying the exact opposite of what Bibi Netanyahu is talking about And I'm going to read to you exactly what they said. Okay, here's the first page. At a meeting, after making amendments, we approved the recommendation. This is not just a report by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. This has been approved by the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, this report. And what did it say? Based solely on military considerations. What is the minimum territory that Israel would require to permit an effective defense against possible conventional Arab attack and terrorist raids? The high ground, which runs north-south through the center of West Jordan to include the Latrun, possibly Jerusalem, and portion of the West. This is exactly the opposite of the Trump plan and Bibi's plan. Next. Okay, discussion of the key Israeli border areas. This goes into chapter and verse why Israel needs to keep the western part of the West Bank. In specific, requirements, a boundary along commanding terrain overlooking the Jordan River could provide a short, however, at a minimum, Israel would need a defensive line generally along the axis and then the northern part of the Dead Sea, which is what I just showed you, everybody here. And provide additional terrain for the defense of Tel Aviv. It would also provide additional buffer for the air base at Beersheba. In addition, this would give a portion of the foothills to Israel to avoid interdiction by artillery in the Israeli villages in the lowlands. What does that mean? That means Katyusha rockets being fired into 70% of Israel's population and 80% of her industrial base. That is what this would mean. It would also provide adequate lines of communication for lateral movement. Now, in the past half an hour, I've taken you from this drawing to a larger context of this drawing and comparing it and contrasting it to the Alone plan and to the Trump plan, and counterposing this plan with what the Joint Chiefs of Staff said was a minimal defensive posture and acclamation of territory by Israel. And again, what is this drawing? This drawing is exactly what the Joint Chiefs of Staff just said. What did they say? They said that this area here that I've just circled in red, which is the left-hand or western part of the West Bank, has the ability to be a launching point of what? Of rockets. Right into Israel's heartland. And by the way, I just want to make everybody clear about this one. What's this? That's Israel's main air base. That's inside of Katyusha rocket range. What's this? That's another huge military air base in Katyusha rocket range. What's this? That's Lobe Airport. Oh, sorry, this one was Lobe Airport. This is another, Lobe Airport is right in Katyusha rocket range. And what is this? This is another air base that's in Katyusha rocket range. And of course, you've got Hatzor to the south that's in Katyusha rocket range. And Tel Nof is now in Katyusha rocket range because the Katyusha rockets they've developed can go a little bit further. So in sum, what you have is a very these are the various rockets they're firing, and this is to the left the size of a Katyusha. How one guy can carry the thing and fire the thing. Now, with that, Rabbi, I will open it up. That's really my presentation. If everybody, anybody who wants a PDF of everything I just sent can either email the synagogue or email me.
Mark, I'm going to put it now in the chat box and then they can
Okay.
just download it.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you, Mark, for your wonderful presentation. And now we're going to open up for questions. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box. And Mark, if you could read the chat box and answer the questions as they appear. So I see
where's the
already
chat
some
box?
questions. If you could read them and then answer them for everyone.
At the bottom of your screen, next to share screen, you see a chat.
At the bottom of the screen, hold a second.
You can press stop sharing and it'll make it easier.
Oh,
for
okay,
you.
okay. So,
I'll make
okay,
it.
okay. I see chat. Okay, Bruce. Can you center this? The bottom of the slides are cut off. Thank you. I can't really, how it showed, I can't really center it. And you can, this is for Bruce, Mac 13, iMac 13. Sarah is going to put the full PDF of what I just sent you. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we hear you, Mark.
Okay.
Sarah's going to put it in the PDF. There are other questions there about your talk. Do you see those questions?
Yes. Please ask all the questions for the Q&A in the chat. Okay. So why did General Alone have the opposite plan from the Joint Chiefs? Excellent question. Okay. General Alone wasn't thinking, in my view, in a robust way. He was thinking in a very narrow view, which was, and which we are living with today. Okay, the Israelis do not want to rule over 1.5 million or 2 million Palestinians. At the same time, they want a level of security that is in some way tangible. And so he just came up with this idea thinking, oh, this is going to solve the problem. You have to remember, in 1967, you didn't have air defense weapons the way you have air defense weapons today, in that it was a completely different air defense system. You didn't have the water problems in 1967 that you had subsequently. You don't have the population problem that existed today. You didn't have the Katyusha rocket problem. Okay, what the Joint Chiefs were talking about was artillery. Okay, however, today you're not worried about artillery. You are worried about Katyusha rockets because, again, Katyusha rockets from Gaza can only go into the very sparsely populated areas around Gaza. However, the Katyushas from the West Bank into a highly populated area is like firing a rocket from Brooklyn into Manhattan. it is sure to create a catastrophe. It is sure to kill someone. One Katusha from the West Bank into Israel, into the 70% population zone would be absolutely a catastrophe. Okay, it is okay. So I've got a lot of questions here. Let me go in order. How about Hebron and the Gush? Those base Hebron in the Alone Plan is sort of on the cusp. It's it's really on the cusp. And the Gush in the plan, it varies. In the Trump plan, there's really less area east of Jerusalem, and in the Bibi plan, there is the Gush area. Okay. Next, is it given that if Israel annexes, the Palestinians will get their own state? That is, okay, that is, you're asking a glib question, but you are not asking a glib question. You are in fact asking the heart of the question here and the heart of the problem. Because is the Trump plan a Trojan horse for Israel to essentially control the whole West Bank and effectively make sure there's never a Palestinian state? Or is the Trump plan a Trojan horse against Israel, which will create a Palestinian state in the heart of the West Bank that will be irreversible and create a existential threat to Israel? It is unclear, because if you read the Trump plan, there are loads of safeguards on the paper. I can show you loads of safeguards. He talks about Israel keeping the airspace, about Israel keeping the water resources, about Israel keeping the electromagnetic spectrum, about Israel keeping this, that, and the other thing. But it's all on paper. Once you've created a Palestinian sovereignty, you think they're going to listen to any of this? What's in this thing? They're not going to listen to a darn thing. And the real issue is immigration. Who's going to control immigration? The Trump plan will have you believe that the Palestinians are only going to be allowed 5,000 extra Palestinians in the West Bank per year. Are you kidding me? How are you going to control, if you have a Palestinian state where 100,000 people, Palestinians, come and visit the West Bank in the first 2 months of sovereignty, and they decide, oh, I'm not a visitor anymore, I'm a permanent resident. We have enough problems in this country figuring out how to get illegal aliens out of this country. How the heck is Israel going to tell the Palestinian state that, oh, those 200,000 visitors from Iran, which is all the El-Quds force, they're not allowed to stay anymore? Are you kidding me? So the question that Izzy asked is really the core question. Is this a Trojan horse against Israel, or is this a Trojan horse against the Palestinians? It is unclear. It is unclear what Bibi wants to do. It is unclear what Trump or the Americans want to do. Next, Michael Levon to me. So what do you propose as a workable plan? Okay. I propose as a workable plan the status quo, period. If you read the Trump plan, believe it or not, is the status quo. It is really the status quo, okay? If you read all of the thing, if all the bells and whistles, all the security issues that are embedded in the Trump plan, they don't have sovereignty. The Palestinians don't have sovereignty over immigration. The Palestinians don't have sovereignty over airspace. The Palestinians don't have sovereignty over their water resources. The Palestinians don't have sovereignty over military sovereignty over any part of the West Bank. That is the status quo. Why do you use the word annexation when it's the application of Israeli sovereignty? It's an important distinction, okay? Bruce, I respect you 100%, but I'm gonna tell everybody a story. I gave a talk to Congress. There were 150 people in the audience, 100 people who were staffers, 50 visitors, 5 congressmen. After I gave my talk, someone stood up and started yelling at me. How can you call these settlements? How can you say the West Bank? Okay, how can you call it the West Bank? Shouldn't you call it Judea and Samaria? Shouldn't you say it's housing or whatever? Okay. And my response to that person is the same as Bruce. I'm here not to play with words. I'm here to get people to understand that Israel and the Jewish people are up against another Holocaust if a West Bank state is created in the West Bank. So I don't play with words. And I use words that other people, if they listen to this video, will understand. Okay? Next. MAB to everybody. Is the biggest complaint of the Palestinian government that there would be a buffer east of the proposed MAB 38? The biggest complaint of the Palestinian government is not that there would be a buffer zone east of the proposed state. If you read the Trump Peace to Prosperity plan, they despise and reject every, not word, every syllable in this plan, every letter, the paper it's written on. So if you want to understand why, just Google Trump peace plan and you go to the White House, you'll get it. I'll give you a little bit of a taste here. Okay. This is on page 4. Okay. The Palestinians deserve a better future and vision. However, Palestinians must embrace peace by number 1, recognizing Israel as a Jewish state. No. Number 2, rejecting terrorism in all its forms. No. 3, allowing for special arrangements that address Israel's and the region's vital security needs. What? No. Another Palestinian government, no. Next, okay. It goes on and on how they have to stop funding terrorism. They have to stop paying terrorists. They have to give up the airspace. They have to give up their water resources or the water resource. I mean, it just goes chapter and verse. There isn't a word in this plan that the Palestinians can live with. Next, how might Jordan respond to a proposed annexation? Okay, the biggest joke in the world about Jordan responding to a proposed annexation is the last thing that the Jordanians ever want in this universe is to have a Palestinian entity that is contiguous with their country. No matter what King Hussein Abdullah, whatever his name is, they never, ever want any kind of Palestinian entity next to them, because guess what? They've seen what Gaza did to Egypt. Gaza was where the revolution started against Mubarak, believe it or not. Okay? They had all of these terrorists that Gaza had, that then basically the Muslim Brotherhood at the time was being controlled by, Gaza was controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood. If any Palestinian state is created, the first country to be annihilated will be Jordan and taken over by the Palestinian state. So you can't believe a word the Jordanian monarch has to say about it. I yell it to everyone. It's obvious that the plan is not a military plan, but a plan created to eliminate the absorption of Palestinian population. So why not annex anyway? Because we still need to go into the Palestinian areas either way for defense. So why not annex? Okay. The real great question of why not annex, okay? The issue of annexation is, what is the price of annexation with not the Palestinians, not whatever piped up about, okay? The issue is, what's the deal? What is Trump's quid pro quo, if I can be so rude as to use that phrase? What is Trump's quid pro quo for Israel annexing this area? Are they, by annexing this area, actually going to agree to cede the Western area to a Palestinian state? Which gets back to the earlier question of, is this a sweetened cyanide pill? Is this a Trojan horse against Israel? I can't tell you. I don't think anyone knows. So the real issue is annexation, whatever you want to call it, acclamation, addition. The real issue is what goes on with Western Samaria. That is where the ball of wax is. And I would be so bold and so rude as to say, you know, why are you even worrying about annexing the Jordan Valley when the Gaza belt is being Katyusha rocketed, and you've allowed a de-annexation of the areas around the Gaza Strip to Katyusha rockets? They don't have the cojones to defend a sparsely populated area around the Gaza Strip, for crying out loud, let alone annexing an area in the West Bank. But if it is annexing the area to foreclose the possibility of creating a Palestinian state, I'm all for it. Okay, next. It appeared, Bonnie Cohn, to everyone, it appears that the Trump plan are totally indefensible. How can they possibly consider this if security should be a main consideration? Bonnie, baby, I'm with you. And the problem is, as I started this talk, I had two Israelis come into me. One had been in the IDF spokesperson's unit for many years and still very involved in Israel. The other was an Israeli who was the executive director of one of the biggest synagogues in southern Florida for the last 30 years. Neither of them had the slightest clue what I just showed you. If they didn't have the slightest clue, can you imagine everyone else not having the slightest clue? Abe, Zell, sir, to everyone. Both plans are suicidal. Abe, I'm with you. Okay. Jerry to everyone. Hasn't desalinization plant reduced the water problems to Israel? Not really. Because number one, in order to quote unquote desalinate, you have to use up all the gas that you just discovered. And number two, in any kind of Katyusha rocket war, in fact, the last one, what they were doing was they were firing rockets at the desalinization plants. So if you destroy the desalinization plants, you don't have any water. Third, it's not just water. It's contaminated. It's the same way that fresh water goes to the coastal plain from Western Samaria. The Palestinians have refused to take their toilet water and have it purified. So, in fact, you have all of these diseases going through the feces and the urine that the Palestinians are exporting into the ground in the Western Samaria is in fact infecting the Western areas and the Western aquifers under the coastal plain. Aren't there the majority population in Jordan Palestinian? Tamar Edison, yes, they are. Okay, which again is a part of this whole conundrum. Okay. Did anyone have any extra questions? Oh, Andrew Semi, the status quo has a problem with the Arab population increase overtaking the Jewish population. What do you propose as a solution as status quo? The man has asked the billion-dollar question. And what's the billion-dollar question? Oi, Gewalt. Oi, Gewalt. If we don't do anything, the Palestinians are going to overwhelm us. Okay. Now, on this issue, what I would like to do is share my screen again. Okay. And we'll go to this graphic here. This graphic right here. Now, since time immemorial, what they've said is, oh, the reason why we have to give up the Palestinian, to create a West Bank Palestinian state is because the Palestinians are going to overwhelm us. Well, guess what, everyone? If you create a Palestinian state, look what happens. Look what happens to the population in the Palestinian areas. It goes up like a rocket ship. Okay? Okay. If you keep the status quo the way it is, it stays relatively flat. Okay. Now, why is that important? Because you see these little guys over here? This Katyusha rocket here? Okay. These Katyusha rockets carry chemical weapons and nerve agents. They just don't carry explosives. So, if in 3 years, which is by this 3 years here, time 3, Israel is forced to reinvade the West Bank, guess what? Instead of having 2.5 million Palestinians, you'll have 4 million Palestinians in the West Bank instead of 2.5 million Palestinians. So actually, creating a West Bank state will fuel the problem, not solve the problem. Tamir Adelson, the Palestinians have stopped security cooperation with Israel. Next terror attack, doesn't that give Israel the right to say the Oslo agreements are null and void? Now on this one, I would like to quote my precious daddy, William K. Langfan, where you can read, Google William K. Langfan Palestinian Charter, and you will see in plain English and plain facts that are irrefutable that the Palestinians, from the word go, rendered the Oslo Accords null and void because they never changed any of their provisions of their charter calling for the destruction of Israel, the annihilation of Israel, and the erasure of Israel. So the Oslo Accords, in my view, are a fantasy that Israel has fantasized about. The same way when I was 17, I fantasized about some beautiful actresses that I would see on the movie screen. It was always a chimera wrapped in a delusion. Anthony, to everyone, can you discuss the water issue again if any of the plans are negotiated and approved? Can guarantees be built into the plan? Excellent question, Anthony. Okay. Now, this is the problem. Today, and for the not only have the Palestinians been violating the changing the charter, the Palestinians have been violating the water agreements that they've been, and they have been over pumping the water as it is. Now the problem is, how do you stop an area from over pumping water? It's not a rocket. It's just a little building that has a pump and that you've dug a well. So it's virtually impossible to stop the water digging unless you control and closely control the areas. Okay, Tamar, the status quo is not relatively flat. There are continuing underreported terror attacks going on all the time. Wait 1 second. Tamar, I never said the terror attacks were flat. I was talking about the Palestinian population growth in the West Bank. Now, some people argue that the Palestinian population is growing very rapidly. Others argue that it's actually even going down. I'm not a Palestinian demographer. I want to just be a simple approach. I take the CIA's number, and the CIA's number is that Palestinian areas are increasing at 3% every year. But it's the population, not the terror attacks. I'm with you, Tamar. I'm sure that the Palestinian terror attacks are underreported, and I agree with you. How would a Biden presidency affect the status quo? It would be an annihilation of the status quo. And in my view, there would be a forced Palestinian state that would bring the annihilation of Israel if a Biden presidency was affected. And not only would there be a creation of the Palestinian state, there would be a complete reversal of the anti-Iranian actions of President Donald Trump, which has put a huge clamp on Iran's ability to export its evil everywhere. So you'd have two problems. Number one, Biden would create a Palestinian state. And number two, he would reverse everything with Iran that Trump has done and go back to Obama's $150 billion to Iran. Do the Palestinians in Jordan have Jordanian citizenship? I think a lot of them do. Are African illegals, especially in Tel Aviv, who are settling and reproducing children who by birth are now also diluting the Jewishness of the country? I would say yes. Do they in any way work with the Palestinians against Israel? I don't have any specific knowledge, but they certainly are creating problems for Israel. For the people who are living in Tel Aviv today, and God only knows who would be affected tomorrow. Anybody else? Anybody else have any questions? And by the way, please do not in any way think this is the end of the conversation on any of these things. If you have any other questions, if you want to get any of my materials, email the rabbi, email me. You just Google my name, you'll get a bunch of videos you can watch to your heart's content. And also watch my father's videos. I'm putting in a plug for my precious father's videos. God bless him, a million times over.
Mark, thank you very much for your in-depth analysis of the annexation plans. We're all waiting with bated breath thank you. Thoroughly researching every subject matter and presenting it in the most clear and clear and precise manner that we could all comprehend it. So thank you, Mark. We all appreciate your presentation.
God bless
this
you all
evening.
and have a beautiful, beautiful Memorial Day and a blessed everybody. I wish everybody
health,
happiness, and safety in every way.
And
God
Mark,
bless you.
Mark, we take this opportunity to salute your father, who served in World War II and helped liberate the camps on this Memorial Day.
God bless him a million times over.
May God bless him. All the best. Have a happy Shavuos, everyone.
Shalom, shalom, shalom.
All the best. Bye.
Shalom. Bye.